What if the person held at gunpoint wasn't just any citizen, but the most powerful law enforcement official in the country? How does systemic racism play out when even someone with immense authority can't escape its grip? Let's dive into a true story that shook the nation and forced us all to confront uncomfortable truths. But first, did you know that in this small town alone, black drivers are 3 times more likely to be pulled over than white drivers? Think about that for a second. If you like this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, literally anywhere in the world. Also, hit that subscribe button to stay updated and drop your thoughts below. Your voice matters. Thanks for being here. In a quiet suburb outside Washington, D.C., FBI Director James Harper was heading home after a long day. Known for his groundbreaking efforts to reform the Bureau, James had always believed in justice for everyone. But on this particular evening, he found himself face to face with the very system he'd sworn to improve. Pulled over by 2 local police officers, James quickly realized this wasn't going to be routine. One officer accused him of speeding despite no evidence, while the other made comments so racially charged they could have come straight out of history books we thought were closed. When James calmly identified himself as the FBI director, things didn't de-escalate, they exploded. Instead of verifying his credentials, the officers ordered him out of the car at gunpoint, calling him names no human deserves to hear. A bystander recorded the whole thing, capturing every word, every tense moment. That video would change everything and nothing at the same time. Before we go further, let's pause here. What do you think happened next? Do you believe James handled the situation perfectly, or could he have done something differently? And what does this say about how far we still need to go in addressing racism within our institutions? We'll be right here in the comments, ready to chat and hear your thoughts. Stay tuned as we uncover the rest of this gripping story, one that challenges us all to rethink who gets justice and why. The next morning, the video of the incident went viral, sparking outrage across the nation. Social media erupted with hashtags like "Justice for Harper" and "Reciven in Plain Sight." People couldn't believe their eyes. How could this happen to the FBI director, of all people? But for many, especially those who've experienced similar treatment firsthand, it wasn't surprising at all. This was just another reminder that privilege doesn't shield you from racism. It only highlights how deeply ingrained these biases are. Meanwhile, the DOJ launched an immediate investigation into the officers involved. Preliminary reports showed no evidence of speeding, confirming what James had said all along. Public pressure mounted as protests popped up outside police stations and government buildings. Calls for accountability grew louder, but so did voices questioning James himself. Some conservative commentators argued that he shouldn't have escalated the situation by showing his badge or demanding respect. Others pointed out that if a white man in his position had been treated the same way, there'd be riots in the streets already. Inside the FBI, things weren't much better. While some agents rallied behind James, others whispered about whether he'd mishandled the encounter. Critics claimed his reaction reflected poorly on his leadership skills, saying the director of the nation's top law enforcement agency should know better than to provoke police officers, even if they were wrong. These criticisms stung, not just because they felt unfair, but because they echoed the same double standards Black Americans face every day. Would a white FBI director have faced the same scrutiny? As the days passed, the story dominated headlines. News outlets dissected every detail, from the officer's body cam footage, which corroborated the bystander's video, to James' calm yet firm demeanor during the confrontation. Polls showed overwhelming support for holding the officers accountable, but opinions split sharply when it came to James' future as director. Should personal experiences influence professional evaluations, or was this simply a case of politics interfering with justice? Before we move forward, take a moment to think, how do you feel about the criticism James received? Do you think it's fair to judge leaders differently based on their race or background? Let us know in the comments. We're eager to hear your thoughts. Because as this story unfolds, it becomes clearer that the fight against systemic racism isn't just about punishing bad actors, it's about rethinking how we define fairness, accountability, and leadership. Stay tuned as we explore the aftermath of this explosive incident. The investigation concluded with the officers being suspended pending trial, but the damage to James' career was already done. Despite widespread public support, internal pressure within the FBI intensified. Critics argued that his reaction during the incident, though justified, didn't align with the image of calm leadership expected from the director. Days later, the FBI board announced James' termination, citing his inability to de-escalate tense situations as a liability for the Bureau. The decision sent shockwaves through the nation. Supporters saw it as a betrayal, a clear example of double standards. Protesters gathered outside FBI headquarters, demanding answers. Meanwhile, James struggled privately, grappling with feelings of injustice and frustration. He knew he'd become a symbol, a reminder of how far we still have to go in addressing systemic racism, even at the highest levels. Before moving on, what do you think about the board's decision? Was it fair, or another instance of bias disguised as policy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As we wrap up this story, consider how easily those fighting for change can become casualties of the system they aim to reform. Stay tuned for the final chapter. In the months that followed, James Harper stepped away from the limelight, but he didn't fade into silence. Instead, he channeled his experience into action, becoming a leading voice for police reform and racial equity. He penned a best-selling memoir titled Behind the Badge, which laid bare the complexities of leadership in a racially divided society. In speeches and interviews, James emphasized the need for empathy and accountability, urging law enforcement agencies to confront their biases head-on. The officers involved faced disciplinary action, though charges were slow to materialize due to legal hurdles. Their suspension sent a message, but many argued it wasn't enough. The incident sparked broader conversations about training protocols and the use of force, leading to new legislation aimed at reducing bias in policing. Still, progress was incremental, and frustrations lingered. James' legacy grew beyond the FBI. He founded an organization dedicated to mentoring young leaders of color, teaching them how to navigate systems designed to hold them back. His daughter, once bullied over the controversy, found her own voice as an activist, inspired by her father's resilience. Together, they became symbols of hope, a reminder that even in defeat, there's room for growth and change. As the dust settled, James reflected on the irony of his situation. A man tasked with enforcing justice had become a victim of injustice himself. Yet he remained optimistic. "Change doesn't come easy," he often said. "But if we keep pushing, keep talking, and keep acting, maybe one day stories like mine won't make headlines." What do you think is the biggest takeaway from James' story? Do you believe real change is possible within institutions like the FBI and local police departments? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. This story isn't just about one man's struggle. It's about all of us learning to create a fairer, more equitable world. Thank you for joining this conversation, and stay tuned for more stories that challenge and inspire.